Good evening, you're watching Mission 2024. I'm Preeti Choudhry. One release prematurely of a convict, a murderer, a politician, a Bahubali has exploded in Uttar Pradesh politics. We're going to get you the latest on that. Let me take you through the headlines. India Today tracks down survivors of Delhi rape accused Babu's harassment. Women detail horrific harassment by Premude Khaka. 4 sexual harassment complaints lodged against rape accused officer. Prime Minister Modi talks tough to China after Johannesburg handshake, raises border standoff with Xi. MEA sources say China requested for talks with Modi. Congress MP Rahul Gandhi trains guns at Modi government in Ladakh, claims Muslims and people of Manipur under attack in China. In India, beg your pardon.
For 4 months, Manipur has been burning. It is happening to Muslims, it is happening to other minorities, it is happening to Dalits, it is happening to tribals, right? Because it is the attitude and the approach of the BJP.
Russian President Vladimir Putin to skip G20 summit in the national capital. Kremlin confirms Putin will not attend, says Russia's focus on special military operation. Javelin star Neeraj Chopra qualifies for Paris Olympics by entering World Championships final with his season best of 88.77 meter throw. Former US President Donald Trump arrested and released on bail in election fraud case. First mugshot of ex-US President Trump released after arrest. All right, the latest news that is coming in are celebratory shots after the release of politician, murderer Bahubali Amarmani Tripathi and his wife. Though he continues to remain in hospital, but the convicted in fact of murder, the former UP minister Amarmani Tripathi and his wife are all set to walk free. They've been released prematurely by the state government of Uttar Pradesh, and the Supreme Court has also not stayed their release. The former minister and his wife are convicts in the murder of poetess Madhumita Shukla, as Tripathi's supporters wait for his release. What is strange is this hero's welcome, which is already in the making. This release bears a stark resemblance to the release of gangster politician Anand Mohan earlier this year. Tripathi and wife was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2007 for hatching a conspiracy of killing Madhumita in 2003 when she was pregnant with his child. The two will now walk free after the UP government has ordered, citing good behavior, their premature release. Madhumita Shukla's sister Nidhi, fighting a long battle, expressed shock, claiming she was misled by the UP governor to sign the release order. Meanwhile, politics have also erupted over the issue. The Congress Samajwadi Party slammed the Yogi government, accusing the BJP government of resorting to vote bank politics, sympathizing with criminals before general elections next year.
ये सरकार बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ का नारा देती है, और जो लोग बेटियों की हत्या में बंद हैं, जो सज़ा याफ्ता है और इतने जघन्य अपराध में शामिल हैं, उनको निश्चित तौर से इस तरीके से छोड़ना मैं समझता हूं कि ये उचित नहीं होगा। और जो क्योंकि इसका गलत संदेश जाएगा समाज के अंदर, ऐसे लोग जिन्होंने इस तरह की जघन्यतम हत्याएं की हैं, जिसमें जघन्यतम कार्य किया है, और ख़ास करके जो महिलाओं के उसमें लोग रहे हैं, जिनको महिलाओं का सम्मान नहीं किया, निश्चित तौर से ऐसे लोगों को सरकार को छोड़ना चाहिए। इसको नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए, हम लोग इसकी निंदा करते हैं।
भारतीय जनता पार्टी और उसकी सरकार हमेशा बहन बेटियों के खिलाफ होने वाले अत्याचार, अन्याय, दुर्व्यवहार में जो अपराधी शामिल होते हैं, उन अपराधियों को संरक्षण देना बीजेपी का एजेंडा है। हम महामहिम राज्यपाल के अधिकार पर कोई टिप्पणी नहीं कर रहे हैं। हम केवल भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार और बीजेपी का चरित्र बता रहे हैं।
All right, let's cut across now to our reporters to get an understanding on how was this man released. The UP government, Nalini Sharma, getting us the latest in terms of what went down in Supreme Court today. Nalini, the Uttar Pradesh government is saying that the Supreme Court hasn't stayed the release of both Amarmani Tripathi and his wife. What has the Supreme Court asked? Because it's given a 4-week notice to the Uttar Pradesh government to respond to certain questions that it has raised on the release.
Well, Preeti, it's really interesting the kind of developments that have happened in Supreme Court, because remember last year Amarmani Tripathi as well as his wife had both approached the Supreme Court seeking premature release, stating that they have already spent enough time in jail. They were awarded a life sentence and their conduct has also been good. But the UP government is still failing to act on their request for an early release. So with regard to that, they knocked on the doors of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court last year had categorically asked the UP government to decide within a period of 8 weeks as to whether or not the couple should even be released in the first place. There was no decision again taken by the UP government, so they had to come back to the Supreme Court in July this year, and they said that despite the Supreme Court orders, there have been no clear directions given by the UP government on whether or not the couple will be released. So in respect to that, the UP government had told the Supreme Court that due to some administrative reasons, they have not been able to stick to the 8-week deadline that was set by the Supreme Court earlier, but they will now decide in another 6 weeks, and it is after that Supreme Court order is this order of the release coming in from the UP government. Now, the first question that arises is why the Supreme Court has not stayed their release. Primarily because it's not in the Supreme Court's domain to make this decision. Even when they had approached the court asking for release, the Supreme Court had categorically said that it is for the government to decide as to whether or not the couple should even be released in the first place. But at the same time, it's not like they've refused to hear the petition challenging the release itself. They've issued a notice to the UP government to ascertain as to whether or not they have been released on valid grounds and following the due process of law. So that's what the Supreme Court's going to look into, and only if it comes to the Supreme Court's notice that there has been some law that has not been followed, a proper procedure has not been followed, then only in that case can we expect for the Supreme Court to overturn and stay this release with regard to the Tripathi couple.
Nalini, how much time has been given to the Uttar Pradesh government to come back with the questions raised by the top court?
Well, we're given to understand that 8 weeks' time has been given to the UP government. But Preeti, if I can also point out something different that the Supreme Court also said in an earlier case. Earlier this week, when the Supreme Court was hearing the petition regarding the release of the rapist in the Bilkis Bano case, there were some very pertinent questions asked regarding on what basis the governments decide as to who should be given an early release and who should not. And the reference and the context for this question that the Supreme Court had asked at that time, where they stated was that the prisons are overcrowded. And this is something that has been a constant ongoing problem, which came to light especially during the COVID time. And because the prisons have been overcrowded, why is it that more prisoners are not released more often on remission, citing good conduct? And why is it that only select prisoners are released by the state governments? So as to whether or not there is any vested interest in releasing such politicians, especially like a lot of political parties are already claiming, is something that the Supreme Court might look into if, even in this case, they decide to go into the aspects of exactly on what basis the release was given, and was it or was it not only on the basis of good conduct.
All right, Nalini, appreciate you joining us. Interesting there with what the Supreme Court has said, but celebrations have already broken out in Gorakhpur. The jailer has gone to the hospital because both Amarmani Tripathi and his wife continue to be in hospital. They are allegedly unwell. Santosh Sharma joins us live. Santosh, जैसे ही ऑर्डर आया कि दोनों अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और उनकी वाइफ को प्रेमेच्योरली रिलीज किया जाएगा, एक जश्न का बहुत ज़्यादा सेलिब्रेशंस होने लगी हैं उनकी कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी में, एरिया में।
देखिए बिल्कुल जो जश्न का माहौल था वो महाराजगंज के नौतनवा, जहाँ पे राजनीति है, जो राजनीतिक गढ़ कहा जाता है अमरमणि त्रिपाठी का, वो गढ़ है। और जाहिर सी बात है कि जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट के आदेश पर जब राज्यपाल ने इसके रिहाई का आदेश दिया अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और मधुमणि का, तो उसके बाद जश्न का माहौल होना था और वहाँ पर समर्थक आतिशबाजी करने लगे, ढोल नगाड़े बजाए जाने लगे। मैं इस समय पर जो गोरखपुर का BID मेडिकल कॉलेज है, जहाँ पर अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और उनकी पत्नी मधुमणि यहाँ पे एडमिट लिमिट है, मैं वहीं पर मौजूद हूँ। अभी थोड़ी देर में 10 से 15 मिनट का वक्त और लगेगा जब यहाँ पर रिलीज ऑर्डर पहुंचेगा, और उसके बाद ये आप जो सामने देख रहे हैं ये बीआरडी मेडिकल कॉलेज का जो गेट है और सामने पुलिसकर्मी ये सुरक्षा में, चूंकि अभी भी अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और मधुमणि दोनों पुलिस कस्टडी में है, जेल की सुरक्षा में है, अभी रिलीज नहीं हुए हैं। जब रिलीज ऑर्डर आ जाएगा, यहाँ पर जेलर रैंक का अधिकारी आएगा, यहाँ पर रिलीज ऑर्डर रिसीव कराया जाएगा, उसके बाद ये जो पुलिसकर्मी आपको दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं ये हटा दिए जाएंगे, यानी कि तब आधिकारिक तौर पर ऑफिशियली अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और मधुमणि त्रिपाठी रिहाई हो जाएगी। तो उत्तर प्रदेश की सियासत के लिए आज बहुत बड़ा दिन, क्योंकि लगभग 17 से 18 साल जेल में बिताने के बाद मधुमणि और अमरमणि त्रिपाठी जेल से बाहर आएंगे। हालांकि लंबे समय से वो गोरखपुर के बीआरडी मेडिकल कॉलेज में इलाज के लिए इसी प्राइवेट वार्ड में भर्ती हैं, यहाँ पर वो इलाज चल रहा है। लेकिन जिस तरीके से मधुमिता शुक्ला हत्याकांड में अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और मधुमणि को साजिश रचने के आरोप में उम्र कैद की सजा सुनाई गई, उसके बाद 2007 में सजा सुनाए जाने के बाद से लगातार दोनों पति पत्नी जेल में थे। लेकिन जब दया याचिका डाली गई मधुमणि की तरफ से सुप्रीम कोर्ट में कि उनके अच्छे बर्ताव के चलते उनको रिहा किया जाए, उस पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जब आदेश हुआ और उसमें जब हिला हवाली की जाने लगी उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार के द्वारा, तब कंटेम्प्ट ऑफ कोर्ट यानी अवमानना का जो नोटिस है वो मधुमणि की तरफ से दायर किया गया। और अब उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार ने मधुमणि और अमरमणि त्रिपाठी दोनों पति पत्नी को रिहा करने का आदेश दिया है। कल रात का आदेश है, अभी कागजी कार्रवाई पूरी हो रही है और कागजी कार्रवाई पूरी हो।
संतोष, बहुत शुक्रिया कि आप हमसे जुड़े और जो पूरा अभी प्रोसेस है वो बताया। There will be political implications of this as well. Viewers, we're going to continue to get you that. But joining me right now on the phone line is Nidhi Shukla. Nidhi Shukla is the sister of Madhumita Shukla, the poetess who at 26 years of age was killed by Amarmani Tripathi and his wife. She was allegedly at that point of time carrying the child of Amarmani Tripathi. निधि, आपने आज बहुत एक चीज़ बोली है निधि कि आपको जो गवर्नर हैं उत्तर प्रदेश के, उन्होंने आपको फूल करके साइन कराया गया उनके रिलीज ऑर्डर पर। ये बहुत बड़ा आरोप है निधि, आप बताएंगी कि क्या हुआ है?
नहीं, उनको भ्रमित किया गया है। हमने ये कहा जो रिपोर्टें अधिकारियों ने लगाई हैं अमरमणि के अच्छे चाल चलन की, तो गवर्नर साहब को हम उनके आरोप नहीं लगा रहे हैं। हम ये कह रहे हैं कि उनको भ्रमित किया गया है, उनके सामने गलत दस्तावेज रखे गए हैं। और यही चीज सामने आपके तब आएगी कि जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो जवाब मांगा है स्टेट गवर्नमेंट से कि कौन सा अच्छा चाल चलन है, सारी बातें सामने आ जाएंगी। क्योंकि या तो मेरे पास जो कागज हैं जो ये साबित करते हैं कि अमरमणि जेल कभी गया ही नहीं, या तो वो सरकारी कागज गलत है और या तो वो कागज गलत हैं जो कि नए बनाए गए हैं।
निधि, आप कह रही हैं कि आपके पास एक आरटीआई का पूरा जवाबदेही है जहां पर आप ये साबित कर सकती हैं कि अमरमणि त्रिपाठी और उनकी जो बीवी हैं उन्होंने 61% अपना जेल टर्म जेल के बाहर बिताया है।
मेरे पास एक नहीं है मैडम कागज। दरअसल हम आपको बताएं, कई सालों से हम सबको लेटर लिख रहे हैं, पत्र डाल रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये 12 वर्षों से 2012 से 2023 तक अमरमणि और मधुमणि कभी ये उत्तराखंड गए ही नहीं। ये 12 वर्षों से इन्होंने अपनी सजा बाबा राघव दास मेडिकल कॉलेज में एक 5 स्टार कमरे में अपनी सजा बिताई है। रात में ये लोग घर भी चले जाते थे। तो ये सारी चीजें जब हमने आयोग से एकदम लड़ाई लड़के तब जाकर के हमें ये कागज मिले हैं, आयोग की मेहरबानी से मिले हैं। वो आरटीआई के सारे कागज, एक नहीं कागज है, मेरे पास 10-15 कागज ऐसे हैं और भी बहुत सारे पुख्ता सबूत हैं जो कि मैंने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में लगाए हैं। और मुझे आज ये जो अपराध का नंगा नाच हो रहा है उत्तर प्रदेश में, देखकर ये लगता है कौन मेरा दुर्भाग्य है जो हम उत्तर प्रदेश में पैदा हुए हैं।
निधि,
पेपर झूठ।
निधि जी, आप ये पेपर आप कह रही हैं आपने ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट में दर्ज किए हैं। आपने एक और चीज बोली है निधि जी, वो भी बहुत मान लीजिए बहुत ग्रेव एलिगेशन कह सकते हैं उसको, जो आप कह रही हैं कि आपकी खुद की जान को खतरा है, आपके प्रियजन, आपकी जो फैमिली है उसकी जान को खतरा है।
आपको मैं बता दूं, अभी मेरे पास एक नहीं 6 कालें आ चुकी हैं, वरना हम आपके स्टूडियो में भी आ सकते थे। जो हम जिन पत्रकारों ने हमेशा सच्चाई का साथ दिया है, आज सबके बुलाने के बाद भी हम स्टूडियो नहीं जा पाए, क्योंकि जब हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट में अपनी याचिका की सुनवाई के लिए गए 6 फोन मैडम मेरे पास आ चुके हैं। कहाँ हो, लखनऊ मिलो, आकर के क्या तमाशा लगाए हो। आपको क्या लगता है जिस अमरमणि को अपराधी साबित करने में उसने जो मर्डर किया था बहन का, उसको साबित करने में सीबीआई, सीबीसीआईडी, सेशन कोर्ट, हाई कोर्ट, सारे लोगों ने मेहनत की, तब असली साबित कर पाए कि इसने, तब इसको पकड़ पाई। ये इतना शातिर अपराधी है।
आपको किसके फोन आए हैं निधि?
मेरे पास अननोन नंबर से लगातार कॉलें आ रही, 6 फोन मेरे पास आ चुके हैं दोपहर से।
कौन लोग हैं ये?
मेरे परिवार, ये अमरमणि के गुर्गे हैं जो कि इनडायरेक्टली धमका रहे हैं और डरवा रहे हैं। क्योंकि आपको मैं बता दूं, अमरमणि कोई छोटा क्रिमिनल नहीं है। अगर छोटा क्रिमिनल था तो आप बताइए, सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने आदेश ये दिया था, जो उम्र कैद की जो हमने कोर्ट में याचिका फाइल करी है, उसने ये कहा था, उन्मानी अदालत ने कहा था कि आपको उम्र कैद हुई है, ये सजा आपको जेल में काटनी है। लेकिन वारे सरकारें और प्रशासन, जिन्होंने कभी इस सजा को अमली जामा वो लोग पहना ही नहीं पाए। हमेशा वो अस्पताल में रहा उत्तराखंड का एक कैदी, कभी उत्तराखंड गया ही नहीं। ये मेरे पास पुख्ता सबूत है जो कि मैंने कोर्ट में लगाए हैं।
निधि,
किस आधार पे रिपोर्टें बना करके इसको जब सबको पता था, हमने सबको बता दिया था कि 25 तारीख को सुनवाई है, कृपया इसकी सजा माफी पर तब तक ना कुछ आदेश करें जब तक कि कोर्ट का आदेश।
निधि, जो आप मुझे अभी बता रही हैं, क्योंकि जो पहले है वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने पूछा था यूपी सरकार से कि क्या अमरमणि त्रिपाठी को छोड़ा जाए कि नहीं, आप डिसाइड करिए। उनके पास काफी वक्त था। उस वक्त क्या आपने, जो आपके पास सबूत हैं, जो योगी सरकार है, जो सीएम है उत्तर प्रदेश के, जो कानून के बहुत सख्त कहलाए जाते हैं, उनके सामने पेश किए थे आपने?
हमने एक कागज नहीं पेश किया है, पूरे बंडल हमने भेजे हैं। प्रमुख सचिव गृह साहब को भेजा, डीएम गोरखपुर को, एसपी को, डीआईजी जेलर, माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी को, माननीय गवर्नर साहब को, राष्ट्रपति जी को, सबको हमने एक बार चिट्ठियां नहीं भेजी हैं, दर्जनों बार भेजी हैं। और सिर्फ ये गुमराह किया गया है क्योंकि माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी से मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है, वो अपराधियों के खिलाफ है। वो ऐसा अपराधी उनके गृह जनपद में 12 वर्षों से रह रहा है और आज उसको सजा माफी दी गई है। तो कृपया मेरी उम्मीद, मतलब मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है कि इस सजा, मतलब इस रिहाई पर रोक लगा दी जाए, इस रिहाई पर रोक लगा दी जाए।
निधि, ये आपकी रिक्वेस्ट सीधा जो सीएम है उत्तर प्रदेश के योगी आदित्यनाथ उनसे है?
उनसे है, गवर्नर साहब से है, जिन्होंने आदेश किया है, क्योंकि मेरे और मेरे परिवार की जान को बहुत भयानक खतरा है। और आपको मैं बता दूं, अगर मुझे कुछ हो जाता है तो फिर हिंदुस्तान में दोबारा कोई न्याय की उम्मीद नहीं करेगा, क्योंकि जितनी मेहनत हमने 20 वर्ष की है और फिर भी हम उसको सजा न दिला पाए, दोबारा कोई इंसाफ के लिए मांग नहीं करेगा।
निधि, मैं आपसे आखिरी सवाल पूछूंगी। जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट है, उन्होंने 8 हफ्तों का वक्त दिया है, उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार से पूछा है कि क्या ये रिहाई एज पर प्रोटोकॉल, एज पर रूल रेगुलेशन हुई है। अब अगर आप देखें तो जो बात तय है, ये तो एज पर प्रोटोकॉल ही लग रहा है। इसमें जो रूल्स रेगुलेशन है, उत्तर प्रदेश की सरकार तो कहेगी कि सारे रूल्स रेगुलेशन फॉलो हुए हैं, तो इसमें आगे आपकी क्या याचिका रहेगी?
तो सवाल ये है कि रूल्स अगर फॉलो किए होते तो जो हमने कागज लगाए, जो हमारे सरकारी कागज जो हमने लगाए हैं, तो क्या वो गलत है क्या? भाई, हमारे अपने मनगढ़ंत कागज नहीं है वो, जो हमने आरटीआई से प्राप्त किए हैं, जिन कागजों में साफ साफ लिखा है कि 12 वर्ष से ये जेल गया ही नहीं। तो किस तरीके से अब भाई भ्रष्ट अधिकारी कुछ भी बना सकते हैं? मेरी माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी से यही एक रिक्वेस्ट है कि क्योंकि 8 हफ्ते का समय है, अमरमणि जिंदा हमको छोड़ेगा, नहीं छोड़ेगा, क्या कांड करेगा, क्या नहीं करेगा, कुछ नहीं पता। कि कम से कम अब तो वो लोग रिपोर्ट सही लगाएंगे ही, क्योंकि जो कागज हमारे वहां पर रखे हुए हैं, जो हमने माननीय अदालत में लगाए हैं, या तो वो कागज गलत है जो सरकारी कागज मेरे पास है, और या तो जो इन लोगों ने लगा करके रिहाई करवाई है, भ्रमित करके, झूठ बोल करके जो फर्जी दस्तावेज लगाए हैं, तो वो गलत है। ये सारे जवाब सुप्रीम कोर्ट में मांगे जाएंगे, क्योंकि एक माननीय अदालत ही है जिसने मधुमिता केस में इंसाफ तो किया, लेकिन सरकारों ने कभी उस कानून को, उस अमरमणि पर वो कानून कभी भी काम नहीं आया।
निधि, 20 साल हो गए हैं जब आपकी बहन का कत्ल हुआ है। 20 साल आपने खुद लगाए हैं इस लड़ाई में। आज लगता है कि जाया गया सारा?
आज ऐसा लगता है कि जिंदगी अपनी खत्म कर ले, हम आपको सही बताएं। आपको मेरे दुख का एहसास नहीं है। मैं बहुत ही ज्यादा कष्ट में हूँ, बहुत ज्यादा परेशान हूँ। मैंने जिंदगी में कुछ नहीं किया सिवाय मधुमिता केस की पैरवी के, और ऐसा कोई कोना नहीं है जहाँ मैंने रिक्वेस्ट ना करी हो और अपनी सच्चाई ना बताई हो कि मेरी बहन का कत्ल मधुमिता का अमरमणि मधुमणि ने किया है। लेकिन वारे राजनीति और वारे भ्रष्ट अधिकारी सब कुछ दरकिनार करते हुए एक अपराधी से इतनी मोहब्बत। जब ये सोचिए इतना संघर्ष करने के बाद भी हम अमरमणि का कुछ न बिगाड़ पाए, उसको सजा नहीं दिलवा पाए, तो आम लोगों की क्या स्थिति होगी? न्याय मिलना है ही नहीं। और हमारा तो सारी देश की महिलाओं से यही कहना है, आपके साथ कोई भी कांड हो जाए, बलात्कार हो जाए, दुर्घटना हो जाए, मार डाला जाए, लेकिन इंसाफ की उम्मीद मत करना, क्योंकि इंसाफ मिलता नहीं है।
निधि, आप सही कह रही हैं कि हम नहीं जांच पाएंगे कि आप किस स्थिति में हैं, पर बस यही कह पाएंगे कि हिम्मत और धैर्य मत हारिएगा, क्योंकि जो लड़ाई है वो आगे भी लड़नी है सुप्रीम कोर्ट में। बहुत शुक्रिया कि आपने वक्त निकाला, आप हमसे जुड़ी निधि, बहुत शुक्रिया। दैट वाज द सिस्टर of Madhumita Shukla, the poetess who was killed by Amarmani Tripathi and his wife in 2003, speaking to us, saying she's lost all faith and still speaking directly to the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, saying that, you know, you're supposed to be the savior of law. What's happened here? With that, I want to cut across to the latest news break we are getting in. All right, the latest news coming in. Now, the Delhi Babu, the Deputy Director in the Women and Child Development Department, Premude Khaka, the latest that has come in is that there were other victims as well. Harassment victims have now been tracked down. India Today has spoken to Khaka's harassment survivor. Shocking details of his harassment have now come to light. It wasn't just the 14-year-old child that he preyed upon. Other survivors have also now come up speaking to India Today, saying that they were pressurized to make fake POCSO reports. Khaka commented on our body and attire. Survivor claims complaints against Khaka fell on deaf ears.
आपके कपड़ों को लेकर के, आपके ड्रेसेस को लेकर के भी क्या कुछ कमेंट्स होते थे?
जी, अक्सर मैं दरअसल कॉलर वाले और पूरे बॉडी को कवर करने वाले कपड़े पहनती थी। कार्यस्थल की जो वो थोड़ा वैसा ही था, क्योंकि वहाँ जुवेनाइल होम था और आम रूप पर हम वो सब कपड़े नहीं पहनते हैं, तो उनका था कि कपड़े बहुत ढीले पहनते हो, इसमें कुछ पता नहीं चलता। उनको लेकर टीका टिप्पणी करना हमारे वस्त्र को लेकर।
अच्छा
जी,
आप ही के साथ इस तरीके से करते थे कि आप और भी स्टाफ के साथ?
नहीं, बाकी महिलाओं के साथ तभी उन्होंने इसको लेकर कंप्लेंट भी करी थी। ऐसा नहीं था सिर्फ मेरे साथ में ऐसा था, बाकी महिलाओं के साथ भी था। बाकी महिलाएं जो पूर्व में भी काम करके जा चुकी हैं, उन्होंने भी इस बारे में हमें सचेत किया था कि इस व्यक्ति से थोड़ा सा आपको सचेत रहना है। इसकी कार्यशैली कुछ इस तरीके की है।
आपके कपड़ों को लेकर के आपकी इस तरीके की जो टिप्पणियां थी, क्या वो एक बार ही की थी या और भी कई बार?
बार बार मैं तो कोशिश करती थी, जो मेरा व्यक्तिगत अनुभव रहा है, कि मैं उन्हें अवॉइड करूं। उनकी मौजूदगी में मैं वहाँ पर इधर।
किस तरह के कमेंट्स थे?
कमेंट्स हमारे कपड़ों को लेकर, हमारी जो बॉडी शेप है उसको लेकर कमेंट करना, इस तरह के कमेंट जो कि एक महिला की जो डिग्निटी है उसको हार्म करते थे।
कुछ और तरीके का भी हरासमेंट था, सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट भी था कुछ इस तरह से?
सर, सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट के अंदर आता है लिंग के आधार पर किसी को नौकरी के बिहाफ पर अगर आप किसी को डराते हैं, धमकाते हैं, नौकरी का डर दिखाते हैं, नौकरी के डर के आधार पर आप अगर किसी को कोई कार्य करने के लिए विवश करते हैं, तो वो नौकरी का डर दिखाते थे। तो मैं नौकरी से निकलवा दूंगा, पूरे दिल्ली में नौकरी नहीं मिलेगी। और अपने जो पोजीशन, उनका जो एक पद था, पद का दुरुपयोग करते थे कि पूरे दिल्ली में इतने लड़के हैं, तुम्हें मैं ऐसे करा दूंगा, वैसे करा दूंगा। वो भय दिखाना जिससे महिलाएं डर जाएंगी और ये सब तुम्हारे कहे अनुसार कार्य करेंगी।
Grave allegations being made to my colleague Sushant there. I want to cut across to Sushant. Sushant, जो आपने अभी बातचीत की है, एक सर्वाइवर नहीं, बहुत सारी सर्वाइवर हैं। क्या पुख्ता सबूत है इनके पास? इन्होंने कंप्लेन की, दिल्ली सरकार जो WCD डिपार्टमेंट है, क्या पुलिस कंप्लेन भी हुई है?
देखिए प्रीति, मैं आपको बता दूं कि एक के बाद एक जो महिलाएं हैं जो कि खुद चाइल्ड एंड वेलफेयर डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर काम करती थी और खाका के अंडर में काम करती थी, वो अब धीरे धीरे खुल करके सामने आ रही हैं। कई सारी शिकायतें जो कि अलग अलग विभाग के अधिकारियों को दी गई थी खाका के खिलाफ, वो सामने लेकर के आ रही हैं। इसके अलावा DCWD को जो 2018 और 19 के अंदर शिकायत दी गई, वो सामने लेकर के आ रही है, लेकिन अब तक कोई कार्रवाई जो है वो नहीं हुई। ये सवाल एक बड़ा है कि आखिरकार जब 2018 से लेकर के कई सारी पीड़िताओं ने इस तरीके की शिकायत जो है वो दिल्ली सरकार के विभागों से की, अधिकारियों से की, चीफ सेक्रेटरी से की। पीड़िता बता रही हैं कि किस तरीके से उन्होंने सेक्रेटरी, चीफ सेक्रेटरी, इसके अलावा कई सारे जो काम करने वाले अधिकारी हैं उस डिपार्टमेंट से, उनको भी कंप्लेन करने के बावजूद जब कुछ हल नहीं निकला तो कोर्ट का रुख जो है उन्होंने इख्तियार किया। यही वजह है कि कई सारी पीड़िता जो है वो कोर्ट का रुख कर कोर्ट के थ्रू इस पूरे मामले की जांच को आगे लेकर के जो है वो जारी है। कई सारी FIR भी जो है वो इस पर दर्ज हुई है। एक के बाद एक मामले जो है वो सामने आ रहे हैं। सीधे तौर पर जो खाका है, जो कि जो महिला एवं बाल विकास विभाग के डिप्टी डायरेक्टर थे, उनके ऊपर अब एक के बाद एक खुलासे जिस तरीके से हो रहे हैं, मुश्किलें और बढ़ने की तय है।
जी। All right, Sushant, appreciate you joining us with the latest details. The irony of it all those complaints fell on deaf ears, apparently, allegedly, where the WCD department of the Delhi government is concerned. A quick break to stay with us. On the other side is To the Point.
The G20 presidency has given India a chance to really take the lead on startups with Startup 20. That can be a major employment generator going forward. I would also like to talk about some of the points where India and the G20 presidency itself this year can really make a big difference. We have actually seen some of these things where India has already taken a big leap. For instance, the digital stack. We all know the kind of steps the digital stack has helped India take as a nation.
Our approach of one earth, one family, one future is resonating across the globe. This success belongs to all of humanity. ये दिन इस बात का प्रतीक है कि हार से सबक लेकर जीत कैसे हासिल की जाती है।
जी हाँ, आप अपने स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि हम लैंडर मॉड्यूल पूरी तरह से सेफली और सॉफ्टली चंद्रमा की सतह पे लैंड हो चुका है। ये हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही गर्व की बात है।
Not just Mission Moon, but the space science of this country was floundered and played with. I don't want to get into that dirty politics today. How people try to get benefit out of it, but I think rise above all this. Take pride in being an Indian. All scientists are my scientists. Satish Sharma, Ramesh Malhotra are all our people. And Nambi Narayan was also ours, by the way, if they have forgotten. So I'm just reminding them. And I think the Prime Minister of this country, who stood by our scientists 4 years ago, when world declared Chandrayaan-2 to be a failure, he not only funded Chandrayaan-3 immediately, rise above petty politics, give credit to Tiranga.
एक बात कभी नहीं भूलिए, देश जागता है, जगाने वाला होना चाहिए। और नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने जिस तरह से वैज्ञानिकों को कहा, जाओ चंद्रमा पर पहुंचो, मैं तुम्हारे पीछे खड़ा हूं। एक बार असफलता हुई फिर लगो, यही तो भारत है। तो मैं आपसे एक ही शब्द कहूंगा, न्यूक्लियर बम बनाने की तो क्षमता थी, अवसर मिला क्या? मुझे बताइए, अटल जी ने दिया। सेना को सीमा पार जा करके आतंकवादियों के हौसले पस्त करने की क्षमता थी, अवसर किसने दिया? भारत के वैज्ञानिकों में सब क्षमता है, अवसर। ये अवसर तब होता है, देश जागता है, जगाने वाला होना चाहिए। इसीलिए प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी का भी अभिनंदन।
श्रेय इसरो को जाता है और श्रेय हर सरकार को जाता है जिन्होंने इसरो की मदद की, हर सरकार को जाता है जिन्होंने इसरो को सपोर्ट किया। इस सरकार को भी, नेहरू के बाद सब सरकारों को भी, क्योंकि इसरो एक ऐसी संस्था है वो किसी राजनीतिक दल से जुड़ी हुई नहीं है और ना जुड़ना चाहिए। ये एक साइंटिफिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है।
New Hero Zoom. Go big, go Zoom. Co-powered by PolicyBazaar.com. हर family होगी insured. G, there's only one.
Warm welcome. You're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Choudhry. Politics once again peaking over the LAC standoff issue. As the Prime Minister talks with China, it was an informal meet is what we've been given to understand in Johannesburg on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. Of course, there are two theories to that. The Ministry of External Affairs maintains that it was a bilateral that was sought by China. China, in an official communique, has stated that it was India that asked for the bilateral. However, in midst of this informal meet in South Africa, once again, politics back home over China has exploded.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a meeting on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Johannesburg. Sources in the Ministry of External Affairs says it wasn't a structured bilateral meeting and described it as an informal meet. MEA sources say there was a pending request from the Chinese side for a bilateral meeting. However, China in an official statement maintains that it was India that requested for a bilateral. It was the first direct interaction between the two world leaders after the brief encounter at the G20 summit in Bali in November last year.
Prime Minister underlined that the maintenance of peace and tranquility in the border areas and observing and respecting the LAC are essential for the normalization of the India-China relationship.
The MEA says Prime Minister Modi and President Xi agreed to direct officials to intensify efforts for expeditious disengagement and de-escalation on the line of actual control. The informal Modi-Xi meet over the border standoff in South Africa has stoked a political showdown back home. While the Congress accused the Prime Minister of lying about the border situation, the BJP charged the Congress with helping China during their rule.
चाइना ने हिंदुस्तान की जमीन ली है, हजारों किलोमीटर जमीन हिंदुस्तान की चाइना ने हमसे छीनी है। और दुख की बात है कि हिंदुस्तान के प्रधानमंत्री ने ऑपोजिशन की मीटिंग में कहा कि हिंदुस्तान का 1 इंच किसी ने नहीं लिया है, यह सरासर झूठ है।
2020 में बीजिंग के एक थिंक टैंक ने, जो वहां की गवर्नमेंट से रिलेटेड माना जाता है, उसने यह शब्द प्रयोग किया है कि चाइना इज पासिंग थ्रू इट्स वर्स्ट डिप्लोमेटिक आइसोलेशन पोस्ट तियानमेन स्क्वायर। परंतु मुझे समझ में नहीं आता है कि राहुल गांधी जी को बार बार चीन की बातों पर इतना प्यार क्यों उमड़ आता है।
The ties between India and China are under severe strain since the Galwan clashes in May 2020. The Indian and Chinese troops are locked in a confrontation in eastern Ladakh for more than 3 years now. Military commanders of the two countries have held 19 rounds of talks but failed to reach an agreement on de-escalation in Depsang and Demchok. The Modi-Xi informal meet comes less than 2 weeks ahead of the G20 summit to be held in New Delhi. Bureau Report, India Today.
So who is lying on China? Is it the government or is it the Congress? Let's cut across to our panelists this evening. Choudhry Pragya, spokesperson, Bharatiya Janata Party, joins me. So does Mohan Kumar Mangalam, national spokesperson, Congress. Mr. Mangalam, once again at the back of an informal meet in South Africa, the Congress today stands accused once again of playing into Chinese propaganda.
Preeti, I'm not sure how we're playing into Chinese propaganda. And, it's not even what the Congress is saying. About end of January this year, about 6 months ago, the superintendent of Leh Ladakh actually presented a paper in an annual DGP conference where he stated that 26 of the 65 patrolling points in eastern Ladakh are now not patrolled by our soldiers, and the Chinese have encroached on our territory there. There were no questions answered with regards to that paper. It was immediately pulled down from the conference website, and a Congress member of Parliament, Manish Tiwari, actually asked 57 questions in Parliament, none of which were answered by the government, especially with regards to that paper. Now you have citizens on the ground in Ladakh also saying they've lost grazing lands. If after all this overwhelming evidence, and of course the Foreign Ministry themselves has said there are issues in the LSE, there is built up, they haven't used the word encroachment, but just look at the kind of engagement we're having with China right now. I mean, this is shadow boxing and posturing that's happening in the BRICS summit on the sidelines. Both sides cannot even agree on de-escalation. We are saying that we've agreed to de-escalate, but their statement is very wishy-washy, talking about handling the border situation carefully. So we have not been able to bring them to a point to even have a good and proper statement, maybe a joint statement from both countries that we are going to de-escalate and revisit this border situation, and the build-up is unhealthy, and that the encroachment should, the patrolling points that we've lost access to need to be reinstated. Status quo should come back.
All right, okay, Choudhry Pragya, the fact is whether, even at the back of the BRICS summit, whether or not there is agreement on the de-escalation, the fact is there was no agreement as well on who called the bilateral. China continues to maintain that India asked for the bilateral. India says that it was China who asked for it, whatever that might be. But having said that, why is it that the constant rhetoric to any question being asked of the government on China by the Congress results in what the Congress's rule tantamounted to, and how much land they ceded in their tenure?
So, Preeti, I have several points that I need to make in this debate, and all of this I will make with references. The first one is that there was a joint press release from India and China on the 15th of August, which is on the MEA website of India, and it is also on the Chinese website. The Congress spokesperson should look that up. And I am reading from that press release now. It is said that the sides agreed to resolve the remaining issues in an expeditious manner and maintain the momentum of dialogue and negotiations through military and diplomatic channels. In the interim, the two sides agreed to maintain the peace and tranquility on the land in the border areas. Point number one. Point number two, when you're talking about land grabbing, and you did mention that in the area of Ladakh, let me tell you that this happened in 1962-1963, 42,000 kilometers at that, and that was done during the Indo-Chinese War, which India lost, and we all know the reasons because of that. And it's still that land which we miss today. There is no further land grabbing that has happened. Again, you mentioned some citizens in Ladakh, but these citizens remain faceless and nameless. At the same time, let me tell you what is happening in Ladakh. BRO is building roads at record speed. There are villages in the very, very remote areas of Ladakh, and I will name the villages. Phobrang is merely 1 kilometer away from Pangong So. It even has the Jal Jeevan mission. So even in that area, that isolation, our missions are reaching. That cannot happen. The roads cannot be made, policies cannot reach the ground if there are Chinese military all around, and the Congress needs to remember that. You go to an area like Kargil, which is manned and guarded by our valiant defense forces, and you put down those defense forces in your statements. You are saying that they don't know what is happening. Is that what you're trying to claim? It is extremely, extremely irresponsible. Also, coming back to now the BRICS summit, Preeti, we need to understand, Congress needs to understand, because the citizens already understand this, that India is doing a very, very nuanced, balanced and strategic act. We are a part of Quad and we are a part of BRICS. Can you imagine that? And we have earned the respects of both these international corporations. Were we able to manage that at a previous time? Not at all. So when you bring in issues with the border issues with relation to China, understand the talks are going on. Understand not a single bullet has been exchanged. Are you gunning for war? Is that what you want? So we are in a position where we need diplomatic ties to resolve issues in a peaceful manner. We are maintaining the integrity and sovereignty of our country, and we're doing a very good job of it. And it will do you well to maybe give some references to the vague quotes that you make. And while you're at it, maybe why don't you tell us what Rahul Gandhi ji discussed in secret with the Chinese ambassador when he met him in Nepal?
All right, Charu Pragya, you've quoted out of the press statement that is issued by China as well as India. You've quoted a part of that, but can I also quote from the press statement issued by China, which you part quoted? President Xi Jinping talked with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the BRICS summit at the latter's request on August 23rd, 2023. Was it at the latter's request, Charu Pragya? Because you've quoted from the same press release. So do you agree that it was India that asked for the bilateral?
So the Indian Foreign Secretary has made it very clear in his statement that it was China which asked for the bilateral. And
so then how is it that the joint statement differs, madam?
So I'm reading the joint statement where you are. Where does this say? I'm reading the joint statement from the Ministry of External Affairs.
But ma'am, you're reading India's statement, not the joint statement. You can also read it from the Chinese. No, you can also read it. You can also read what China has said, what India has said. There is a contradiction which lies there, because both countries have maintained the other asked for the bilateral. But you made some points. You have made some points.
But even if that part is true, would you rather we not talk, we not engage diplomatically?
Ma'am, I am only asking you a question because you quoted. So I'm just telling you there was no joint statement as such. There is in terms of who called the bilateral. There were individual statements that have been given out by both countries. That's all I asked you. Now, having said that, I want to cut across back to the Congress spokesperson. Sir, the question is, what's the difference? I want to ask you, I know you want to respond to the Congress, but ultimately, the fact is, China has never been an easy partner. You know that best. It's been tricky over the years where your government was in power as well. It's not something which needs to be discussed out in the open. It's a sensitive diplomatic fine line that India needs to walk. Why can't we at least understand and address that and not make a public political tamasha out of it? Go ahead, sir.
I hear you. If the Prime Minister or his cabinet had decided to take the opposition into confidence and inform us of the actual happenings on the ground, this probably wouldn't be the case. But at the same time, I will say that in 1962, when we were fighting China in a war, and a very young member of parliament asked the then Prime Minister Nehru to discuss the Chinese war and raise several questions. These are all part of public record. My fellow BJP spokesperson can actually go and look those questions up. They were extremely offensive against the army, questioning the generals, questioning the movements. That was Mr. Vajpayee. And he was advised, Mr. Nehru was advised by his advisors not to have a public debate, but to have a closed debate. And he actually said, no, the nation needs to know what's actually happening. And we had an open debate in Parliament when a war was actually going on between India and China. I'm not denying that we lost the number of square kilometers she mentioned that we did. Part of it actually was in the war, and part of it was when Pakistan gave a portion of the land to China, or ceded a portion of the land to China. But I'm saying that if you're accusing us of insulting Jawans, why are you insulting the superintendent of Leh Ladakh, who wasn't talking about what was given back in 1962, but was talking about, and is talking about in his report, the loss of patrolling points that's happened in the last 2 years since Galwan? That there's no response to. Now, as far as Quad versus BRICS, I'll step away from responding to some of the canned points that were made by her. You know, BRICS, when it started in 2000, was born out of this sort of Goldman Sachs paper. We were maybe half of China's size then. We are 1/6 or 1/7 of China's size now. China pretty much rules BRICS in terms of their economic power in that gathering. And 3 weeks ago, I thought the Indian government was making a smart move when we were actually denying accepting more members to BRICS, because it was basically China trying to expand their geopolitical influence. But turns out that we've capitulated to that demand as well and allowed for 6 more nations to be part of BRICS. If the Indian government really wants to put diplomatic pressure on the Chinese, which is actually what they should be doing, military pressure, I trust my armed forces, I trust my Jawans, they're doing the best they can. But if you want to look at international diplomacy, what would actually serve us right would be forming a grouping outside of China right now. Because nobody in that grouping of BRICS right now has the wherewithal to stand up to China. They are 18% of the total 26% of the global GDP that the BRICS represents.
But okay, Mr. Manglam, okay, fine. This is all well and good to say in television studios. You and I both would agree that China is a formidable force, and the diplomatic line that India needs to walk is very tough and very fine. But that prompts me to go back to the BJP spokesperson, Charu Pragya. Charu Pragya, let's accept, right, that India ceded a lot of land over the years, successive decades, starting from the early 60s to China. Having said that, we are not China. We are not here to run a propaganda in terms of what is going down or not going down at the border. It cannot be an opaque conversation that gets shrouded with one excuse, which is because it's a sensitive matter or it's a matter of national security. Certain amount of discussion needs to happen. Whereas ceding land to China in your tenure is concerned, Madam, you and I also both know there is enough evidence coming in from open source investigation, OSINT as well, which seems to make it rather clear that we have ceded land. So let's get, with the facts there and talk of what is there instead of getting into this whole rhetoric of, oh, we haven't ceded land, the Congress did it in its term.
So when we say that we have not ceded land, I am not using it like a rhetoric. I am saying this because this was said on the floor of the House in our parliament by our external affairs minister. It is said by our army generals.
There's been enough open source intelligence on that. You know it.
Yes. Can I please finish? So, when every single round of meeting happens, it is not done under wraps. A press release is made and official statements are made on both the sides. And when you collate this information, you have the entire picture. So I am sorry, instead of believing an obscure and undefined source of information that is emerging out of China, I would rather believe my own army chiefs. Now,
I'm coming to you, sir. Let her finish. Make your point, madam. Madam, make your point. Yes, please.
Yeah, let me also finish. Now, he says that it is all done under wraps. Now, it would not seem like that to you if you just made the effort to listen to the statements that are coming from the Indian Army and the Indian MEA. Just stick to that for the time being. You are the one who's making irresponsible statements. Now, can I ask you, you're a Congress spokesperson. Presumably, you will know what Rahul Gandhi is talking about. Can you name even 1 or 2 people that you claim to be quoting from Ladakh? Please name even one person from Ladakh. Do you have a name on it? Do you have a face on it? How can you say हमारे जवान पिट रहे थे? How can you make statements like that and get away with it? How can you go to Kargil in Ladakh and then talk about China grabbing land? You are there, sir. You are there driving down roads that are made by our BRO. You are there meeting people in a safe way. But how are you able to do that?
But Charu Pragya, you yourself just admitted, like I said, there is open source intelligence clearly suggesting that there has been land grab.
When did I say that, Preeti?
You just said it.
When did I say that?
Just
can you quote my line?
A minute ago, ma'am. A minute ago. But having said that, okay, now you're saying, you just said it a minute ago, you admitted. All right.
No, I didn't.
Okay, fine. No, okay. So we have lost no land under the tenure of.
I did not say that.
Well,
I
ma'am,
did not
okay.
say that.
Okay, I think we were given to believe that's what you meant in clear terms.
No, I did not say that. I have very clearly said that Rahul Gandhi is able to be there because it's a safe and secure place. It is a place as safe and secure as that because we have things under control. We have diplomatic conversations going on at the border. We have military conversations going on at the border.
Which are tantamounting to nothing as of now. But Mohan Kumar Mangalam, that is okay because it's a very, very sensitive relationship and it takes time. It takes years sometime when de-escalation comes into question.
Just give me a second, just one second.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Mangalam, go ahead.
You know, we've gone through an entire show almost and she has still not answered one simple question, which is, was the superintendent a part of the government of Leh Ladakh lying when he put out a report that said, in the last 2 years, we have lost access to 26 of 65 patrolling points, and China is encroaching on our land in those areas. Was he lying? You should take him to book. And as far as whether Mr. Gandhi, I having to name the villages that Mr. Gandhi spoke to, hey, you've already hauled him in for whatever alleged complaints you had against him. He's been investigated, he's been questioned. Ask the NSA to question him. Go ahead.
All right, okay, Charu Pragya, you wanted a name, there you have one. And it is a fact, the sheer conversations that have been going on in terms of on the border issue is where India wants to talk about getting back its patrolling points and somewhere down the line, it's quite clear that we have lost at least 26 of them.
And what is the date that these patrolling points have been lost? Are you going to pinpoint a date and tell me this has happened in the Modi regime? Now, Preeti, let's be very pragmatic and let's be honest here. Let's be pragmatic and let's be honest here. We've lived through a situation where our armed forces did not even have the right to fire a couple of bullets without getting approval from New Delhi. You know how many people we've lost because of that. Now, we are changing the situation on ground across our border. Everywhere, whether it is near China, whether it is near Pakistan. We are working on empowering our army every single day. Now,
this is also rhetoric at the level, right? So one would,
operate in a way that they see fit. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. Now, you cannot sit on control on the army and say,
10 seconds, Mr. Mangalam, please respond. I'm going to go into a break.
You know, because she's obviously not read the paper. I'll read out from the paper. Our presence is lost in 26 patrolling points, PP number 5, 17, 24, 32, 37, 51, 52, 62, due to restrictive or no patrolling by the Indian security forces. I imagine this is as per order of the government. And I want to know why our government did not let our forces patrol there. Please let me finish.
All right, with that, with that, I appreciate both of you for joining us. There's no point talking over each other, but ultimately, you know, instead of hiding behind rhetoric and muscle flexing or, you know, trying to portray something which is so complex and so sensitive as so simple, I think both the government and the Congress need to have a rethink on that, but we're going to keep putting the spotlight on all the questions that have been raised. Where it comes down to who is lying on China, well, it's not really that simple a question anymore, is it? A quick break. Stay with us. On the other side is Mood of the Nation with Rahul Kanwal and Rajdeep Sardesai.
Our approach of one earth, one family, one future is resonating across the globe. This success belongs to all of humanity. ये दिन इस बात का प्रतीक है कि हार से सबक लेकर जीत कैसे हासिल की जाती है।
जी हाँ, आप अपने स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं कि हम लैंडर मॉड्यूल पूरी तरह से सेफली और सॉफ्टली चंद्रमा की सतह पे लैंड हो चुका है। ये हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही गर्व की बात है।
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
मैं टीम चंद्रयान को, इसरो को और देश के सभी वैज्ञानिकों को जी जान से बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं, जिन्होंने इस पल के लिए वर्षों तक इतना परिश्रम किया है। उत्साह, उमंग, आनंद और भावुकता से भरे इस अद्भुत पल के लिए मैं 140 करोड़ देशवासियों को भी कोटि कोटि बधाइयां देता हूं। मेरे परिवारजनों, हमारे वैज्ञानिकों के परिश्रम और प्रतिभा से भारत चंद्रमा के उस दक्षिणी ध्रुव पर पहुंचा है, जहां आज तक दुनिया का कोई भी देश नहीं पहुंच सका।
And we'll be able to continue with the experiments, including the Pragyan rover coming out and then doing all the experiments. So we are looking for very, very exciting 14 days from now for Chandrayaan 3.